Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
the World Economic Forum's report, Embracing the Quantum Economy, a Pathway for Business Leaders.
Yeah.
Now, this is the 2024-2025 edition, and it's really kind of a guide for all of us, really, business leaders especially, in understanding and leveraging the potential of these crazy quantum technologies
Right.
that are really starting to reshape the economy as we know it. I mean, it's
Yeah, think of it like a briefing almost for,
yeah,
if you're sitting there thinking, hey, what's all this quantum stuff? How could it actually affect my business or
yeah,
the industry I'm working in?
yeah, and they do a good job, I think, of
Yeah.
cutting through all the technical complexity,
Yeah.
and it really zeroes in on the
Right.
the strategic and economic implications, which
hmm
I really appreciate.
Absolutely. And it's very broad. It's not just about the quantum science itself, but about business strategies that companies need to adopt.
Right.
The wider impacts on various sectors, how's the economy going to be affected by all this? What are the technologies that are going to enable all this? And
Yeah.
then, of course, something we'll be digging
We,
into,
we love to talk about, yeah.
which is the role of IP
Yes.
and intangible assets in this whole emerging quantum landscape.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
it's worth noting that it's very timely.
Yeah,
We are in 2025.
right.
The UN has declared it the International Year of Quantum Science and Technology.
Huge.
It marks a century since their foundational discoveries in quantum mechanics.
Right. That's amazing.
So there's a lot of attention right now on this field.
Yeah, really is. And so this report is really, comes at a perfect time.
It does. It does.
And someone who I think brings such a unique perspective to this, and we're sad he couldn't be with us today, Dr. Benjamin Delsol. His background is so fascinating
Yeah.
because it's this combination of PhD in quantum nanoelectronics,
Wow.
deep understanding of IP law.
And a focus on innovation strategy.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, I think, is that he's worked in that intersection,
Yeah.
serving as fractional CIPO, Chief Intellectual Property Officer,
Right.
and CIAO, Chief Intangible Assets Officer for a different organization. So he really understands,
Yeah.
how deep tech, like quantum, translates into tangible business value.
Right. That's the key. That's the key, right?
Yeah.
Is being able to take these amazing technologies and bring them down to earth.
And protect that value.
Yeah, exactly. And how to protect it.
Yeah.
And he has this great quote, IP as a weapon of mass construction.
I love that.
I love that too. I think it's so powerful and
Yeah.
and thought-provoking because it really highlights the central role
Right.
that IP is going to play as this quantum industry matures.
It frames the stakes perfectly.
It does.
So let's get into the core of the report.
Yep.
Let's look at some of these rapid advancements we're seeing in quantum technologies
Right.
and the early impacts they're already having. So the report really emphasizes this progress across quantum computing, quantum communication, and quantum sensing.
Okay. Let's unpack those a little bit for
Okay.
our listeners. Quantum computing, we've all heard about it.
Yes.
And you probably know it already. It holds this promise of tackling these crazy complex problems
Right.
that are way beyond the reach of even the most
Hmm.
powerful classical supercomputers that we have today. Then there's quantum communication, which is really aiming for this new standard of secure data transmission,
Uh-huh.
using these principles of quantum mechanics to achieve
Right.
what's often called unbreakable encryption,
Yeah.
which is a pretty powerful thing to think about.
Quite powerful.
If you think about all the data breaches and everything that's happening
Yeah, absolutely.
these days. And then there's quantum sensing,
Yes.
which is all about reaching these unprecedented levels of precision in measurement,
Right.
which could revolutionize everything,
Everything.
from medical diagnostics to navigation.
Absolutely. And this isn't just theoretical anymore.
Right.
The report points out that
Mm.
there's a significant global commitment, over $40 billion
Okay.
in public sector investments fueling the R&D in these areas.
$40 billion.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
And a serious bet on the future.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It really is.
But, even with all this excitement and all this money going in,
Uh-huh.
there's still got to be some hurdles to overcome, right?
There are.
And the report kind of touches on some of these challenges that each of these fields are facing.
Yeah. If we think about quantum computing
Yeah.
for a minute, a major challenge is in those error rates and the stability of the qubits.
Right.
Now, a qubit is that fundamental building block
Right.
of a quantum computer.
Right.
And unlike a classical bit, your 0 or 1, a qubit can be 0, 1, or both at the same time.
Yeah. That's the crazy part.
That's right. It's called superposition.
Right.
But these quantum states, yeah,
They're fragile.
yeah,
They're easily disrupted by environmental noise.
yeah,
And that leads to errors in computation.
right.
So that's a big challenge.
Yeah.
Another one is scalability. Can we build quantum computers with a large enough number of these stable, interconnected qubits to really solve complex problems,
Real-world problem.
real-world problems?
Yeah,
And then you have the issue of interoperability.
right,
These quantum systems need to be able to work alongside our existing
right,
classical computing infrastructure.
right. It's not about replacing. It's about them working together.
It is. It is.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what about quantum sensing? What are some of the roadblocks there?
So with quantum sensing, the sensitivity and precision is truly remarkable.
Yeah.
You can imagine sensors so accurate they could detect minute changes in gravitational fields, magnetic fields.
Yeah, incredible.
But how do you maintain this level of performance outside of a very controlled lab?
That's a big challenge. Things like temperature changes,
Yeah.
electromagnetic interference can really degrade the
Yeah.
accuracy.
You'd have to have a pretty controlled environment to make it work properly.
You would. And then there's a practical aspect. Miniaturization, making these sensors small enough,
Yeah.
energy efficient for widespread use.
Right.
From medical devices to monitoring tools.
Sure.
And then a more fundamental challenge is standards and calibration.
Right.
How do we make sure that these sensors
Uh-huh.
are giving consistent and reliable measurements across all these different devices and applications?
So it's about taking this incredible sensitivity
Yeah.
and actually deploying it in the real world.
In the real world.
Right.
Great.
Yeah. And then finally, this quantum communication and security. We all love this idea of unbreakable encryption. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Um,
But I imagine there's complexity.
yeah, there's got to be.
So one of the biggest hurdles is how do we ensure this security and reliability over long distances?
Right.
Quantum signals, particularly those used in QKD, quantum key distribution,
Yeah.
can degrade over fiber optic cables.
Oh, okay.
So you need things like quantum repeaters to kind of boost the signal along the way
Yeah.
without destroying that delicate quantum state.
Right.
And even things like satellite-based quantum communication
Right.
come into play here, but these are very much
Right. Still early.
early
Michael.
stage
Yeah.
research and development. And then similar to computing,
Yeah.
scaling up, building a network that is very extensive.
A quantum internet, essentially.
A quantum internet, that's right. And making sure everything can talk to each other. Interoperability, standardized protocols
Yeah.
are essential for widespread adoption.
It sounds like each of these areas, while incredibly promising,
They are.
has some pretty big mountains to climb
They do.
before they really reach their potential.
They do.
So what's driving all this interest now?
Why are we seeing
The report talks about first mover advantages.
Yeah, what are some of those? What's the
Well-
advantage for someone who gets in early?
In quantum computing,
Yeah.
early movers could become leaders in the technology. They would have a real edge in solving complex problems in all sorts of industries.
Like what kind of industries are we talking about?
We're talking about materials, science, drug discovery, financial modeling, logistics, you name it.
Wow.
And the report even lays out a timeline.
Yeah.
It suggests we might see commercial applications using these hybrid classical quantum algorithms within the next year or two.
Wow.
Prototypes with initial error correction in 3 to 5 years. More advanced systems, 6 to 10 years out.
Yeah.
And then the long-term goal of fault-tolerant computers beyond that.
That's amazing. So they actually put a timeline on it.
They do.
That's great.
They do.
But it's not all rosy, is it?
Well,
They also talk about some potential pitfalls
yes, they do.
for these early adopters. Like what?
Well, the high cost of research and development.
Yeah.
It's unpredictable
Yeah.
how this technology is going to develop.
Yeah.
You need very specialized workers. And then there are things like export controls on certain technologies.
Right.
So there's a lot of risk involved.
Yeah. High risk, high reward, it sounds like.
It does. It does. And similarly with quantum sensing.
Yeah.
The advantages are things like precision, sensitivity. You could have applications in healthcare for early disease detection,
Yeah.
in defense for better situational awareness,
Right.
environmental monitoring for very precise measurements.
Mm-hmm.
And they lay out a similar timeline there. with niche commercial prototypes potentially emerging soon.
Wow.
Integration into systems midterm, broader adoption further down the line.
So it's similar.
It is sort of trajectory.
It is. But
Yeah.
again, pitfalls. The market might not be there.
Yeah, who knows?
How do you integrate it
Right.
with existing infrastructure?
Right.
You need specialists.
To use these things. Export controls, particularly for those with defense applications.
Sure.
So there's a lot to consider there.
Yeah. And how about quantum communication and security?
Yeah, so the main benefit there is information theoretic security.
Right.
Really secure communication
Yeah.
based on the laws of physics.
Laws of physics.
This could build a lot of trust, privacy for early adopters, especially in sectors with sensitive data,
Right.
and it could offer a real strategic advantage.
Absolutely.
So things like intelligence, secure financial transactions,
Sure.
and again, similar timeline.
Right.
We might see early deployments of QKD and post-quantum cryptography in the next couple of years.
Wow.
Expanding networks in the prototype phase, eventually global networks.
So similar trajectory.
But again, technological hurdles.
Right.
How do we get reliable long-distance communication, satellite-based QKD?
Right.
You need the right people. You need to figure out regulations.
Our workforce again.
Export controls. It's a challenge.
Yeah. It sounds like across the board. Long-term, amazing short-term.
Hurdles.
Big hurdles.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the report also really highlights this interesting synergy
Yes.
between quantum and AI
Yes.
as a driver of innovation. How are these two kind of working together?
So this is where things get really exciting.
Yeah.
It's not one way. It's a true two-way street.
Yeah.
AI is already proving itself to be a really valuable tool in accelerating the development and application of quantum technologies.
Okay.
For example, you can use AI algorithms to optimize the design of quantum circuits, to help calibrate and control that delicate quantum hardware, analyze that huge amount of data that quantum sensors can generate.
So essentially, AI is making
It's an enabler.
an enabler.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
And the report highlights examples like Microsoft's Copilot in Azure Quantum.
Oh, yeah.
This uses AI trained on a huge data set
Right.
to help researchers write quantum code more effectively.
Cool.
IBM's Qiskit transpiler service uses AI to optimize algorithms, make them run faster on the actual hardware.
So AI is making it easier to use these computers.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But like I said, two-way street.
Right. So how is
Quantum
quantum going to change AI?
That's right. So quantum computing could overcome some of those fundamental computational limits we have right now that are holding back even the most advanced AI.
Right.
So for example, quantum algorithms could speed up training of machine learning models.
Wow.
Particularly in areas like deep learning.
Yeah.
So you could develop much more sophisticated, powerful AI.
Right.
And then there are these emerging concepts like quantum machine learning, quantum neural networks.
Yeah, it's a whole new world.
It is. It is. It leverages those unique properties
Right.
to potentially create new types of algorithms with capabilities beyond what we can even imagine right now.
Wow.
Even tasks like image recognition, natural language processing, which rely on handling huge amounts of data, could be vastly improved.
So quantum could unlock this whole new level of AI.
A whole new era.
That we can't even comprehend.
Exactly. And it really shows you how these two fields are going to be intertwined going forward.
So let's talk about the big picture, the quantum economy.
Yeah.
This report makes this case that we're really talking about building these whole new areas of growth. So what kind of economic value are we looking at?
Well, McKinsey, for example, estimates that quantum computing alone could generate between $450 and $850 billion annually by 2035.
That's incredible.
And that doesn't even include quantum sensing and quantum communication.
Yeah, which are all
whole other areas.
Expected to create huge new markets and opportunities.
That's amazing, but it's not just going to happen on its own.
It's not.
The report really emphasizes the need for this strategic vision, investment in R&D, and really this translation
from the lab to the real world.
Exactly. And we are seeing some interesting trends already in investment. Rapid acceleration, particularly since 2020.
Right.
A lot of it going into quantum computing companies.
Yeah.
what's interesting is a lot of these are still small startups.
Right.
So very dynamic, very early stage.
Lots of innovation happening.
But also potential challenges to scale them up.
Yeah, how do they grow?
Into larger companies.
Yeah. Now, the report does a good job of breaking down these potential implications by sector. So let's start with financial services.
Okay.
How is quantum going to kind of reshape this?
So financial services is seen as one of the early adopters and potentially big beneficiaries.
Yeah.
Quantum computing, with its ability to handle these really complex calculations, could revolutionize things like portfolio optimization. Maybe we can get higher returns on investments, risk analysis, fraud detection. The report even mentions examples, like the work by Rigetti, HSBC, University of Edinburgh, using it for credit card fraud.
Wow.
AXA is looking into using quantum algorithms for reinsurance optimization.
Interesting.
Even optimization of securities settlement processes is being looked at.
It seems like anything that requires a lot of complex data would be perfect for this. What about sensing and communication in finance?
So quantum sensing could be used to detect those subtle magnetic anomalies in transactions that might indicate fraud. And quantum communication offers that enhanced security through QKD.
Right.
HSBC and Quantinuum are looking into this.
Yeah.
And even the development of physical encryption networks.
Wow. So really keeping those transactions safe.
Yeah.
Okay. Now moving on to tech and telecom. That's another
ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
So quantum computing could lead to optimized network transformation, improved traffic optimization, quantum communication, enhanced security through that cryptographic agility, making sure the systems are adaptable to any threats.
Right, yeah, that's huge.
Optimize the performance of ICT infrastructure. You could use quantum sensing for things like site surveys, monitoring the structure of telecom infrastructure, and quantum communication for those super secure communication channels.
Right. It's all about better, faster, safer.
It is.
Right, for tech. Okay, let's move on to pharmaceuticals and healthcare.
Okay.
That's where we're all
That's a big realm.
Really going to see this impacting our lives.
Absolutely. Huge potential here.
Yeah.
Quantum computing could really speed up drug discovery and development.
Right.
You can do high throughput simulations of ligand interactions.
Right.
You can accurately predict the complex structures of molecules like mRNA.
Yeah.
And it could also optimize clinical trials.
Make them faster, more efficient.
Make them more efficient, more effective, quantum sensing, better diagnostics.
Right.
Maybe even remote monitoring of vital signs.
Wow.
And then quantum communication can play a role in securing that sensitive health information.
Yeah, keeping that data safe.
Keeping that data safe
is huge.
It is. It is.
Okay. How about chemicals and advanced materials?
So in this field, quantum computing can be a powerful tool for those quantum chemistry simulations.
Okay.
You can design new materials with very specific properties.
Sure.
It could help optimize catalyst design, which is really important in chemical processes.
Absolutely.
And it could even help address environmental challenges.
Right. Really important these days.
Yeah. And quantum sensing could be used for quality control in manufacturing and quantum communication for securing supply chains.
Right. Keeping everything safe and efficient. Okay.
Yeah.
Energy and utilities. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Huge sector. How's that going to be affected?
So this sector could see benefits in things like optimizing the charging and discharging of those large battery systems.
Okay.
Improving the efficiency of tailings treatment in mining.
Right.
Optimizing those energy supply chains.
Right.
Enhancing the integration of EVs into the grid.
That's a big one these days.
It is. It is. And quantum sensing could be used for resource exploration.
Right.
Improving the accuracy of geophysical surveys. Quantum communication can help secure those critical infrastructure networks against cyber attacks.
Right, which is vital.
Very important.
Yeah. Finally, let's touch on automotive, aerospace, and transportation.
Okay, so
another huge sector.
Yes.
Huge impact on all of our lives.
Absolutely. So quantum computing could help with more accurate aerodynamic simulations.
Okay.
Improved corrosion modeling, optimization of traffic flow.
Right.
Managing global supply chains.
Right.
Quantum sensing for navigation systems, detecting leaks.
Yeah.
Monitoring methane from satellites.
Right.
Precise timekeeping. And of course, quantum communication.
Yeah.
For securing internal data.
So really, every aspect of these industries
touches everything.
Could be affected. So it's amazing how pervasive this is going to be.
It really is.
Now, the report also looks at how businesses can actually...
Yeah, how do you get started?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Get started with this and benefit from it.
Yeah. So they outline a few key pathways.
Yeah.
One is explorative initiatives.
Okay.
So partnering with universities, R&D projects.
Right.
Joining industry innovation hubs.
Yeah.
Start with small projects.
Okay.
Pilot programs. And really, continuous learning. Stay up to date.
That's key.
Because it's changing so rapidly.
Right.
You know, learn from the leaders.
Right.
See what they're doing in areas like insurance, healthcare.
So start small. Learn from the best.
Yeah.
Find out where it can actually make a difference.
That's right.
What's the next step then?
So then they talk about building dedicated teams. You need people with the right skills and knowledge.
Right, the experts.
That's right. So assess what you have, define your team structure, recruit the right people, and, you know, the roles will vary
Of course.
depending on the industry.
Right.
You might need quantum algorithm developers, quantum software engineers, data scientists with expertise in quantum machine learning.
And that's going to be industry specific, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
A financial firm needs quantum finance specialists.
Right.
A pharma company might need experts in quantum chemistry simulations.
Right. And then finally,
Right.
the financial commitment.
That's the big question. How should businesses invest in this?
So what are some avenues for investment?
Well, venture capital is a big one.
Okay.
Funding these early stage startups. And we've seen big firms like JP Morgan Chase, Mitsui, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock,
Right.
all investing. Then there are acquisitions.
Right.
You can acquire a promising company.
Sure.
Sandbox AQ bought Good Chemistry. Honeywell bought Cambridge Quantum.
Okay. And then, of course, internal funding.
Sure.
Put some of your R&D budget towards this.
Yeah.
HSBC has done that. Volkswagen has invested in traffic flow.
Wow.
So lots of ways to do it.
So it's really a multifaceted approach.
It is.
You know,
explore, build,
explore, build, invest. But be smart about it.
and manage your risk.
Exactly. So to kind of wrap up our deep dive into this report, what would you say is that key opportunity?
Well, I love the analogy the report uses.
Yeah.
They compare this to a Cambrian explosion
Right.
of technological advancement.
Right. Where suddenly everything
changes.
Right. Yeah.
Just like that period saw a diversification of life.
Yeah.
This is going to be a burst of innovation.
Right.
New capabilities, new industries. Early adopters,
the winners who
are strategically engaged,
who get in early,
are going to have huge advantages.
But it's not without its risks. Right.
It's not.
There are some challenges.
There are.
The report points to challenges with intellectual property, making sure innovation is protected and fairly distributed, resource limitations, particularly talent, access to hardware, and then this risk of an unequal distribution of benefits, creating a quantum divide.
Right. So we've got to be mindful of these things. So what are some key recommendations that they provide?
Okay. So evaluate the risks and opportunities.
Okay.
Engage with the ecosystem.
Right.
Start small with pilot projects.
Yeah.
Build those dedicated teams. Invest strategically.
Right.
Monitor and adapt. Always be learning.
Right. And it's worth emphasizing that relationship again between AI.
That synergy is so important, both near term and long term.
Right. AI is going to make quantum better.
It will.
And quantum is going to change AI.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this report, embracing the quantum economy, it's clear that this isn't science fiction anymore.
No, it's not.
This is happening. It's happening now.
It is.
And it's going to change everything. And I think it's really powerful to think about that quote that we talked about earlier. IP as a weapon of mass construction.
Powerful stuff.
As this Cambrian explosion happens. How are you, the listener, going to approach this? How are you going to think about intellectual property, intangible assets in this new world? How are you going to not just build better businesses, but build a better future?
It really makes you think.
But using these tools.
It does. What problems?
What problems that seemed impossible are now possible.
It's so exciting.
It's really exciting.
It is.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.